written down. A colleague of mine called Trisha Jenkins has got an excellent book coming out. I guess it must be later this year, maybe next year, but it's been written called For Our Spies Only. And that's about the role of the CIA over the past 15 years in the entertainment business. And that's been done pretty much purely through interviews. So, it's hard to know exactly what kind of agendas are being pushed. And sometimes, you get people like, you've got, like you were saying about the crossovers on boards, where you've got people who work on the board of arms companies also working, on the board of Disney, say. That can be dangerous, but, to what extent are they consciously pushing a particular agenda? Well, maybe not so much. Maybe it's more as just a kind of a rather sad structural problem where, you've got people who don't really care about the world, I suppose, about the rights of ordinary people. And, they're kind of the major storytellers in our, or certainly rubbing shoulders with the major storytellers in our whole world. And that seems a bit sick to me. I wouldn't buy a fairy story if I knew that the guy who had made the binding for the book had been out gunning down children.
Absolutely.
It's just not a nice way of having things. I mean, of course, my children watch Disney films, and of course, but it's a sad sort of state of affairs, really, where you have got a world where arms dealers are in the same room and having some kind of effect on entertainment products.
Yeah.
Well, if there's no specific example, that's the answer right there. And obviously, again, the Illuminati have paper shredders, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know about the Illuminati. I haven't come across them in any.
Well, you haven't seen the hidden hand of the Weissopp's Illuminati at work here?
Wait, if you want to write a sequel, then be my guest. I'd love to read it. I'm not sure if I can dig up any information on that.
Yeah.
There are one example that I probably should raise is a possible example of very clear censorship, which was the mysterious death of Gary DeVore, who was a screenwriter who vanished in 1997. Car supposedly ploughed into supposedly turned around on a main road, drove against traffic the wrong way, and then crashed through a small gap in the rail into the Californian aqueduct. Now, no one knows if that is what really happened. There are a lot of suspicious circumstances surrounding his death. I found a copy of an autopsy that had been missing in the post for 11 years, which we dug up in 2010, which said that Gary was, in the opinion of that coroner, who's a private coroner, said that he was murdered. So, and that's partly based on the fact that he was discovered without any hands, which is an indication of assassination.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that was just fish that ate the hands, or maybe they fell off during the accident, or who knows. But the point is that Gary's final script was about the U.S. invasion of Panama in 1989, and his script, which is now missing, went missing during the car accident. And that was so no one has a copy except for a very early copy. But his work appeared to be going into the realms of Iran-Contra, CIA, drug running, and those very murky areas that secret government organizations tend to be very cagey about. And he was... It's a difficult one to talk about because it's obviously it's quite a spooky case, really.
And because people close to the case are still active in the Hollywood scene, and I believe wasn't he at one time was married to the actress on Babylon 5 and other. She's also in the movie The Hidden. I can't think of the actress's name now. But she was quoted in your article as saying that that she would tend to believe her ex, even though he was her ex, that there was something nefarious going on. I'm trying to remember where I read that article of yours, where it was printed.
I was 14 times as well.
And there's a documentary out there that folks can dig up online that's about the invasion of Panama and a lot of the weirdness associated with it, from allegations of thousands killed to allegations of advanced secret weaponry testing being part of that invasion. And of course, there's the whole Noriega drug running aspect of the story that's very much in line with the Iran-Contra kind of scandal. I guess there's one more specific thing I really wanted to ask you about, and it may be a dead-end question, but on that same page, after the Susan Sontag quote, you talk about how perhaps most disturbing is the fact that the media typically treats these products as politically insignificant or even progressive, when all too often they are quite the opposite, and in several cases have had direct script input from the government to send the unmistakable message, quote, use the force. Now, I'm wondering here, are you suggesting, or did you see evidence that that idea of the force from the Star Wars series was somehow influenced by these forces?
Not really, no. I mean, that was just me being cute. But that said, Star Wars is... I did start writing about Star Wars, but in the end I decided to leave some of these slightly more metaphorical takes on American power, because it was just... they can be taken so many different ways. I do know that forces within government have been... there was in Fred Kaplan's book, Wizards of Armageddon, he reports that, I think it was during the Persian Gulf War? I think it was, a group of kind of PSYOP people were calling themselves the Jedi Knights. So I think perhaps that mythology of Star Wars has entered into all aspects of our culture, both low down and high up. So, but no, I haven't seen any evidence of there being any government impact on the Star Wars series. I mean, there was Star Wars was seen in the late 70s as a kind of, politically, as a sort of anti-Soviet Union text, you know, an evil empire that is threatening to destroy everything, and then there's our good kind of Western style, American style white heroes who are, you know, fighting against that. So in that sense, you know, it was kind of supportive of that kind of perspective. But I mean, that wasn't part of a conspiracy. It's just the way things were. And in fact, when the new films came out, it became more obvious, I think, that the film was always about the series was always about how democracies throw away people's rights and allow a dictatorship to take hold, which is the whole point of the kind of the Sith plot. And so, in that sense, I think it was actually influenced quite heavily by Vietnam. That's certainly what George Lucas was saying, and that, you know, and the Nixon era, and sort of seeing, you know, kind of a metaphor for what happens when we allow bad government to get away with trashing our rights.
Well, yeah, there's the part where the chancellor or whatever is like, you know, we're going to temporarily declare martial law. I promise I'll give you all your rights back when the crisis is over. And to me, that's direct reference to 9/11 and the Patriot Act and everything that's come ever since.
Well, there have been so many great satires that have, really made some great commentary on our, how things really happen, like Wag the Dog. But in your book, you talk about Wag the Dog, and it's a little more complicated than it simply being a criticism of the establishment's, methods of going to war and the PR that goes into it and so forth. Taking that as a case there, just describe there, how was Wag the Dog maybe possibly revealing another agenda?
I didn't have any particular axe to grind with Wag the Dog. I think it was just felt like that it was coming from a slightly, it was really obvious that in the Gulf War, which the film was obviously influenced, there was a huge PR effort by massive companies allied with the American government and the Kuwaiti government, with the most extraordinary lies about Iraqi troop atrocities and stuff like this. But the fact that the film kind of makes it's just a couple of guys who are kind of working for the government who are sort of fixing everything, it just kind of, to me, it was sort of like, well, yeah, this isn't really, is this even a satire? This is just like, you know, this kind of happens if you read about what's been happening in the last few years, then it's not really that funny. It's just it's just kind of, this is the way things work. But
you think it sort of trivializes the whole issue, and maybe that's the purpose?
No, not really. I mean, it's just a little $15 million dollar budget film of no great consequence, and I don't think they were particularly pushing some kind of nefarious agenda with this. I don't know. I showed it to a class of students a few months ago, and what was amazing about the film was that it seems to have dated so badly, and I think that's because it came out in 1997 when we were in kind of depoliticized era, if you like, because there was nothing big happening on the world stage, at least, as far as the kind of popular Western view of it went. It seemed to be a stable world, peace and democracy and all that. But, now, because so much has gone down and there's so much suspicion about government, particularly in the Bush era, the students that I showed it to as an adult class, they were an adult evening class, and they just didn't find it funny. They didn't find anything really about it that was kind of new or punchy. At the time, it got quite a lot of editorial comment because it kind of seemed to the kind of Clintonian mindset. But, I think perhaps as a society, we're much more aware now of kind of government duplicity, and it doesn't really need to be pointed out by...
well, that's good. What about Team America? What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, I love Team America as a piece of entertainment. I thought it was interesting that the directors and producers made the deliberate decision to avoid mentioning using George Bush and John Kerry as characters in the film. And they admitted that in an interview. They just said they didn't think it worked as well. But of course, that has the effect of dumbing down the political critique. And of course, what the ultimate meaning of the film was that America is a dick, but at least we're better than assholes, because dicks fuck assholes. It's a brilliant thing. But the problem is it's sometimes a bit more complicated than that, because if you are a dick and you do fuck an asshole like North Korea, then what's going to happen to that asshole? It could create a considerable mess. And that's, I guess, metaphor for what's happening in Iraq as well. So, I mean, they were kind of saying, we can't just constantly be held back by kind of peace-loving celebrities who are, of course, all presented as these horrific figures like Michael Moore, the Michael Moore puppet who blows himself up.
Yeah.
Destroys Team America's base. They filled that puppet full with ham.
Yeah.
So when it exploded, it came out like that. But I think there's got to be, in any entertainment community, there's got to be free, a very wide variety of ideas that are produced. The point is, I think that creative work should be produced in a creative environment that is devoid of censorship and where people are free to express themselves. And, that film was, in a way, a kind of, the New York Times reported it as one of the more nuanced defenses of American foreign policy that they've seen in quite some time. And I kind of agree with it. But, it was produced under free conditions. It was funny. It was effective. It's worth having a range of voices across the board. Do you agree? I don't know.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Absolutely.
No. Absolutely.
And the point is, that it was entertaining. You get another comedy like In the Army Now from 1994, which was a Pauly Shore film, and this was, that was so heavily government influenced because it was used as a recruitment vehicle that there was not even any potential for it to have any entertainment value. It's reviewed on Rotten Tomatoes at a 0% rating. And, you have to work pretty hard to suck out the life of a script to get it a 0% rating. It's like in the late 90s. I'm just writing about this for a second book that I'm doing called Puppet Masters of Hollywood, which I think will be out early next year. In the late 90s, a general called McCaffrey was working in the Bill Clinton White House, and they were injecting basically war on drug agendas into loads and loads of TV series. They had a budget of something like, reports are slightly varied, but something like $25 million.
Wow.
And they would pay producers to insert anti-drug messages in major programs like Sabrina, the Teenage Witch, and Beverly Hills 90210, and all this kind of stuff. And what struck me about it apart from the fact that it's kind of a dodgy thing to do, is that one of the few shows that kind of missed McCaffrey's eye was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And he said, can't find a quote right now, but he said something like, this is just, I know he